Thank you, guys. Sorry, I'm doing the panel, yes. That was my KPI for the year, so hopefully I've met that. So thank you, everyone. We'll just organize the seats, I guess. Nick, for a quick second, before we call the panel members. While we're doing that, thank you, Noel, for setting the scene for me. While we're setting up the seat, I'll just come in the corner and just say a few things. Oops. Jeez. Yeah. There you go. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Prashant, one of the co-founders and CISO at Securo, also the designated dancer. Today's session is all about fearless innovation, the fearless future, which is driven by business resilience. Noel set the scene quite well for me with opportunities, obstacles. That's what we talk about business resiliency when we talk about fearless innovation. Historically, you must have seen, I haven't heard this word before, past few years, but before it was more about IT operations, product services, and keeping the uptime during disruptions. And that was all about resiliency. And we used to talk about business continuity back then, but in today's day, it's more about organizations absorbing, changing, keeping up with the pressure, but at the same time, surviving, but also prospering during this time. And now, as I see it, business resiliency is going to drive more and more innovation moving forward for organizations. Today's panel, the way it's going to set up is that we have a quick rapid fire where we're going to throw some questions to the panel members. Then we're going to hear from the panel members some of the journeys that they've been through, which has driven fearless innovation during the business resiliency period for them. And then we have some key takeaways from those business stories. So having said that, let me introduce our first panel member, Sean Fernandez, CIO for Roller. Sean. So since I know Sean and since I've known about Roller is one of the early adopters of cloud. All cutting-edge technologies that you know about, Roller has been using that, and Sean has been leading that from the front, right from the get-go, in making sure that our organization is not only adapting to the changes in the emerging market needs and all that, but also scaling as the business needs.
Thank you, Sean. Should I grab a seat or introduce myself a little bit? Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Peter Walker. Peter, if you can come out on the stage, please. Thanks, Peter. Peter is our CTO for Protect. Most of you must have heard of Protect, but Protect provides ERM solution, and the main objective behind that solution is driving operational resiliency. Quite topical for what we're going to talk today. Peter has been on the forefront again with technology changes, adapting to the new requirements of the business. But at the same time, what keeps Peter busy also is cybersecurity, compliance, standards, and all that they have to meet, mainly with the government dealings that they have quite heavily. Welcome, Peter. Thank you. Last but not the least, Nivedita Neva. Nivi, come on stage, please. Nivi heads up the cybersecurity strategy and GRC for University of New South Wales. Something very prominent for today's discussion, Nivi has won an award at AWS and ASA for one of the uplift programs that they have been through with University of New South Wales. I'm sure we'll hear some more stories about that. Welcome, Nivi. Maroon to sit here so I can. So you can relax, guys, but not really. So this is a rapid fire round. I'm going to give you two questions. So you have to sum up in one sentence. It's a rapid fire, so make sure you are rapid. Maybe starting with you, Nivi. So, I mean, you can go in sequence. In one sentence, what is business resilience? And what does fearless innovation mean to you?
thinking out of the box for where business is restricted to applying normal controls and applying innovative controls to manage the business risk.
Thank you. Sean?
Business resilience to us was just the way we survived COVID, I think, is probably a good option to it. Over 90% of our customers basically had to shut down over COVID, being a leisure entertainment SaaS business providing point of sale. And so the fact that we survived through it, not only do we survive, we thrived, and we built some of the biggest platforms and services to support those customers outside of it. And that's really what shows, business resilience to me and my team.
Thanks, Sean. Peter?
Oh, thanks, Prashant. Business resilience for us is really about how we bounce back from big operational problems and how we can restore and recover and get our operations back on track.
Thank you. You all have been through some sort of journey in your organization, either that's a quick project that you may have had to do or some longer strategy kind of game that you had to play in the organization. Can you share some of the growth stories that you have gone through recently? Why the business wanted to do that? What was the challenge? Some key drivers behind that? And with all these projects that you have, when you're talking about organization's growth, the main obstacle that you see is the stakeholders, how you take them on that journey when you talk about business resilience, how you build that case with them. Maybe starting with you, Peter, if you can share some stories on your side.
Yeah, I suppose a big one for us has been expanding to overseas. So for a long time we've operated here in Australia and we've had a few forays in expanding overseas. So I think initially we went to Germany and opened up in Germany, very opportunistic. We opened up in Africa, again, very opportunistic. And the last, I suppose, times where we looked at expanding again to overseas, we took on the UK because they have similar sort of legislations. And we chose a very different approach to it. So it was all about taking everything we'd learned from the previous failures and applying that as we opened up. And this year we've done the same with the US as well. So from everything we've learned, we've been able to bundle it up and package that up and take that when we're taking on a big project like going overseas.
Excellent. Nivi, you want to share something about your stories? I don't know if Uplift program is one of them, but...
No, not that. But the previous slide that I had, it has some context on the story.
Oh, sure, yeah.
So generally for the universities, this is very important to understand that you need to understand the nature of the business. So you exist as a cyber team because you're managing cyber risk for the business. And understanding what your business holds, what's attractive to the threat actors, and what is the motivation behind targeting you. So some of the key motivations are universities, normally major universities like UNSW are essentially mini cities. They are very complicated and they have diversity of action. Lots of teaching, academic freedom, which is sort of a big resistance to change, unions that exist within the business, but also a lot of research because our university is one of the group of 8 universities that does research for Australian government, defense, military. So a lot of targeted actors, especially nation-state actors, were interested in the data that is available, and some of the other things are one-stop shop. So basically, we do research for every other sector in the market across Australia and globally. So again, there's a lot, every kind of data would be available in our universities. Never had a previous regulation, never had a key driver to mature their cybersecurity posture. So we try to understand, use all of this, and also we are like leverage platforms, could be leverage platforms as well in terms of quantum computing. So that is also a huge target, that if they could compromise those systems, then they could target the other supply chain that we have. So with COVID, one of the important things which many businesses might have for business resilience or sustainability of the business have suddenly gone fully digital. So for a university, the physical experience was the experience, but we went fully digital without any security in mind. So then the exposure and the attack surface immediately grew. So to understand that, a quantitative risk assessment using a FAIR methodology was done. So I won't go into details, but that's where the beginning of the journey is, understanding the nature of your business, the threat actors that are interested in you, and then exploring what are your options, what are the opportunities that you have to craft that program, which is influenced by that.
Sure, thanks. I do have some points there, but I'll come to you in a second. Sean?
Sure. So I guess the journey that we took at Roller, so I've been there for 4.5 years now, was coming into a startup. Startups, like to build things really, really quickly, but they don't necessarily focus around security or business resilience. So one of the first things, I guess, that was important as a project to bring in was, not pick on the low-hanging fruit that's easy to do or eat the frog, which is really hard things, and these are some of our cultural values. It's to actually build equity, just, social equity, make sure you implement things that people can actually see important features to. One of the first things that even, pays dividends even a couple of weeks ago was we implemented things like on a WAF. We rewrote our infrastructure to be in template form, and we introduced a WAF to it. It didn't block anything, it was just in count mode, but enabling that showed us as the startup was growing and as the marketing team was getting bigger and got bigger budgets, it made a bigger target on our back. And yeah, that WAF seems to be picking up constantly. Even a couple of weeks ago, we were getting attacked seriously on our gift card system. And when we first introduced it, I said it's not going to cost all that much, it's going to be pretty cheap, but we're not sure if we actually are getting attacked. And within minutes, we were realizing that almost every 10 minutes or so, this was a serious offender, and then we invested significantly more money. So I guess the first thing was to, be susceptible to a lot of criticism. Don't be susceptible to criticism, sorry. And then also, maybe introduce these features in from have the data to back up your assumptions of where your attacks are coming from. And that's just how I've grown, kind of always built that social equity, had the data to back it up, and then put together a business plan. Yeah.
So, we all know Rolla has been early adopter of cloud and some of the leading edge technologies, as you mentioned. Like, as a human tendency, you always want someone else to do it first, see them fail, and then you do it. How easy or not so easy it was for you?
How easy is it to fail? Like I said, you have to have a pretty thick skin because there is a lot of criticism. When you're taking away resources from building a little feature that a customer may want to rebuild your infrastructure, moving from, from a cloud to container environment, from Windows to Linux, all these different variations, there is a heavy amount of criticism. But some of those detractors, ironically, to play the devil's advocate, are some of your biggest advocates once you've actually convinced them and once the project is launched within budget or reasonable budget, I guess. And so, I guess that's how we kind of grow as a team as well. And then I think looking back now, even some of the things 2 years ago, I remember them sitting, going, this is a waste of money. We shouldn't have ever done that. They still remember those projects, and they actually still use those projects as some of the prouder achievements that we've had over the last 4 years.
Sure, but one of the key things with all this early adoption is convincing the management. Was it as easy as here are the keys to the bank, go and have fun, or not really?
Well, I guess the first thing is like the cost management, right? As a startup, we're pretty frugal and we want to make sure that we spend money wisely. Yeah. So everything that we do is kind of scrutinized in that way. But instead of just looking at the end of the AWS bill or, basically your vendor's cost, we look at it at a per venue basis. And so as long as the company's growing and the dollar per venue or the dollar per booking is reducing, then we can fit in all these additional features. And sometimes there is a bit of a drop and sometimes there's a spike as we have to, sink costs into significantly bigger pieces of kit. But it's much easier to just make that conversation because the bill always looks like it's going further down when you do it on a per venue basis as we do.
Coming to you, Peter, you mentioned about some of the expansions outside of Australia. Mm-hmm. While you do that, you're still driving your innovations and the resiliency that you mentioned in the products here and how did you manage? How did the business manage both at the same time, keeping technology at the forefront of everything that you're doing?
I think, Prashant, that's a continual struggle. And our purse strings are very hard to get their hands on. I think there's two things is that we've got a very strong development team, and then we're linked up with some very, I suppose, strong thinkers in the risk management world. So we've got those people who are sitting there visioning the product, and then you've got people behind who are able to bring that to fruition, so from designers to developers and good talent. Managing that while you're also trying to expand the company is a difficult job, and something that we're certainly struggling with at the moment. We've grown from maybe 30 people to 150 in the last 2 to 3 years, and there's a lot of changes to culture that we try and maintain. There's a lot of changes to the size of the infrastructure that we're trying to manage. We're now running in 5 different regions around the world, so yeah, there's certainly a lot of challenges in that.
Okay, managing change, I mean, for any organization, be it any kind of change, is really hard. I mean, to drive that change, first of all, but also convince the people who are involved in that change to tell them why it's important. Like, were there any key takeaways for you when we're going through that phase of change, and how did you manage that?
I think one of them is transparency, and just being as transparent as possible. And it's quite hard to do that. I mean, sometimes we give people way too much information, and they don't know what to do with it or how to act. But right from our financials, it's an open book in our company as far as what we're doing, and how we're operating, and just making sure that everyone's aware.
Sure. Thanks, Peter. I'll pause for some time with you guys, but I just wanted to check something with Nivi. You mentioned about such a big program that you're running, and it's university-wide. Obviously, university being university, it's so huge. There are so many business functions, departments to take care of. How do you manage to take everyone on that journey to see this is the objective for the university, this is the goal we want to achieve? How do you manage to convince all of them? Or you didn't convince them, you just did it?
Yes and no. So it starts with top management support, of course. So the transparency is really important. So like I said, the threat and risk assessment that modeled the aggregate loss event dollar value, suppose it is 500 million, take an analogy. And we went to the management board and said that, okay, in the event of this threat scenario eventuating, we took a bunch of, so basically we assessed all of our key assets. It all needs to map to the assets, and we understood what are the threat scenarios that apply to each of the assets. Then it formed an aggregate total risk and dollar value, and we said, okay, if 500 million is the total loss that will eventuate in this situation, and you want to bring it down to your whatever your appetite is, suppose it is $100 million is your appetite, then we need maybe $50 million to bring it down to that. So once you get that buy-in and endorsement by the management board, when you're doing quantitative risk assessment, it has a lot of support, factual support in the background. Once that is done, then you need to have a huge change management team. So change management and communications team is something that is overlooked in many organizations, the need for that. So that is one of the key strengths that we have across the program. Also, understanding what your structure would look like. So for the university, we divided our teams, and we actually went from 8 in the last 12 months to 50 plus. So pretty much shows you that we are on a mission, but half of them are program team. So we went and we socialized this, that very transparently, that in the next 2 years, this is the program team, this is temporary staff, they will come in, we will ramp up, and then after one point, they will operationally hand it over to us, and they will all go away. So that is a good sort of a story, and that's where we got the buy-in. And then you have to establish a policy framework through which you get the senior management support that, okay, you have these accountabilities and responsibilities, and you need to attest at every business unit level as well as the CEO or, for us, vice chancellor level, and then it cascades down in terms of that responsibility. So it doesn't really happen ground up so much, but for the ground up as well as the top management, the change management and the communications team is key.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, we all agree, I guess, cybersecurity professionals here. Top management support is all the more important when it comes to cybersecurity. But just a question for you all, maybe Peter, if you want to take this first. What is that one thing or three things, whatever it can be, that if you reflect back, you could have done better in terms of where you are now and where you started from? I don't know if it's convincing the management or doing something differently that could have lessons learned, basically.
Yeah, okay. I suppose three things that you could do better, or that I certainly would take back, is just, first of all, involving a lot more people within the organisation from day one, rather than thinking that, you know, security is something that you can take on yourself, of really just bringing everyone on board from day one. Eventually we did that, but it took some time to get there. Yeah, I'm not really too sure about the other things, but
That's the key one,
yeah, I think
How about you, Sean?
it makes the biggest difference.
I mean, doing something differently, I think we're still in the process of it, right? But, you know, I guess as far as the platform goes and our engineering team goes, and the DevOps and DevSecOps process was pretty robust from an earlier stage, because we had that responsibility and that accountability well. But, you know, I guess the rest of the organization did not come to the same level of competence. And because we're a SaaS-based company, we don't have an internal server. We barely even had an office. Like, everyone just started working from home pretty conveniently. Paying attention to those people and those devices, and some of the, you know, our help desk staff and our sales team that are on the, you know, road warriors, if you will, paying attention to them. I wish we spent more time up front to make sure we protected them from, you know, the wild, wild west of the internet. And if we did it something better, I guess, you know, it was actually rolling out more important platforms. Like, you know, we rolled out CrowdStrike a few years ago, and, you know, I wish I'd done it sooner. Because as soon as we did it, again, we realized how much vulnerabilities actually exist out in the system. Specifically, people don't restart their computers. They were like holding on to like 3-6 months and sitting with, you know, Adobe vulnerabilities and so on. And just bringing them along would have been so much more convenient. But, you know, we were focused on the platform. We wanted to focus on growing it. There was resilience there. I knew this was something that was a ticking time bomb. It never went off, lucky, but, you know, it was something that I wish we did better.
Sure, yeah. Coming to Peter's point, Robin, there's always a thing, at least in my previous roles, I always had that where if I go and tell that Bob, he's always going to say no. Maybe I'll tell him later when I go and do it. But it always doesn't work. How about you, Nevi?
So
What
for
could
us,
have-
I don't have anything exclusive that I can point out, but risk management is something that, overall risk management, I'm not just talking about identifying risk, but also treating the risk and having that entire risk management framework operational and in practice and maturing is something that if we had done earlier, we would have identified a lot more enterprise-wide risks, which is beyond the control of just cybersecurity. So there are a bunch of risks that require steer course and representation from key stakeholders across the business. And like you said, for universities, it is very decentralized. So in order to manage that, if we had implemented the policy framework, which is completely risk-focused, earlier, we would have achieved a lot. But we're trying to, like, close out key priorities. Some of our key priorities are obviously defense in depth, but also the resilience. So that is our key focus, because with the universities, you cannot apply preventative controls. The nature of the business is freely data sharing and exploring because of research activities, so you cannot apply your essential 8 sort of controls. So being very innovative there in terms of what is fit for business with the cyber risk frameworks and the controls that we have pulled in from ISO 27001 whatever is relevant to the business, NIST 853, and something that most organizations forget about is the Cloud Security Alliance. Everyone's moving to cloud, but you don't have cloud security specific policies. So that's something if we had done previously, it would be great. And also the CrowdStrike or EDR deployments are essential in this resilience type of scheme because you are dependent on your auto-containment capabilities to drive your sustainability.
Sure. That's something we hear quite often these days, sustainability. Great stories from everyone. If we're coming to the end of the session, guys, and hopefully we can have some time for questions. But just if you have to sum up on your stories, what are the key outcomes for your business that you achieved through this journey, I guess? If you want to sum it up, maybe Sean can take it first.
I guess in the last couple of years, just the growth that we've had outside of COVID, leisure and entertainment parks opening up, a SaaS platform, I guess, has been, orders of magnitude of throughput going through it. So, looking back, it's been great that we can all get back together and get back to what, kind of a normal way of living is. And so, I'm so glad that we spent some of that time silver lining for COVID, which is not great, but we did get to revamp everything that we did in the system in there. So, I guess looking forward to what the next future holds when, now that we actually have a really good baseline of everything and the evolution is now just scale and Amazon bill, I guess, but yeah.
Thanks, Sean. Peter?
I really understand that Amazon bill thing. It's the bane of my existence. Hope Amazon's not here. I suppose I haven't really talked about it too much, but Protect's really taken on operational resilience, and as part of that, as part of our risk management product, we've released operational resilience model. So one thing I'm really taken for the technology team and the security team is to do an eat your own pie and use that operational resilience module to build up our own operational resilience. And we've started on that journey, and I think there's still a long way to go, but essentially it's a turbocharging your BCP and incident management and rolling that in, moving it up to the next level.
Thanks, Peter. Nivi, if you want to summarize something, the key outcomes? Yeah.
Some of the key outcomes are the policy framework that I talked about that forms the fundamental sort of foundation of all of the program of work, the threat and risk assessment and repeated threat and risk assessment to understand where your posture is moving, MFA deployment to more than 100,000 users across the university. The resilience side of things, endpoint detection and response forms a key control, and having 24/7 SOC, the awareness side of things, some of the key fundamental controls, because something like awareness targets every individual user, so that is your opportunity to then socialize your policy based on your learning outcomes. So that is one more thing, but like a raft of things that were also done from an assurance perspective for the first time. Like, you don't usually do the vendor risk assessment on an annual basis, something like that, pen testing across more than 100 applications. You can't do it at scale with manual pen testing, so you have to use automated pen testing tools. The application security side of things, which most of us are not so mature in, because you need to build in your security controls into your SDLC. So that is very neatly done with one of our strategic partners. We've just embarked into the GRC journey with Protect. So looking at the next level of maturity, because all of this needs to hang together, and also the compliance side of things.
Sure.
Last thing, metrics. Metrics is very important because you start to discover and demonstrate all the inconsistencies and risks come to the surface, and that's when the cultural change starts to happen, because a lot of these controls and the stakeholders sit outside of IT for most of the businesses.
Nice, yeah. One wise man told me once, you can only manage something that you can measure, otherwise you can't manage. So that's good. We got 2 minutes or so for quick questions from the audience here. If anyone has a question for 1 or 2 questions for the panel members, please do so. I think someone has a mic. I think Nick is there behind with the mic. If anyone has questions.
Thank you, Prashant. My question is to Nemi. By the way, I'm Shra, I work for ABB. And so you mentioned about matrix. Could you give us some good examples of business continuity matrix that we could apply?
I couldn't clearly.
So for business continuity, some of the matrices that you think are quite valuable to apply.
Absolutely. So the moment you call your program resilience program, that needs to picture in your metrics. So your business continuity, your data backups, your DR plans, although it sits outside of the cybersecurity team's remit, that top management buy-in actually gets you there, and your policy requirements need to clearly stipulate how you manage that. So you can't do it at scale across all of your applications. You have to be very selective on what are your high-risk assets, and also apply additional criteria when you are initially embarking on the journey, on where do you want to start in terms of scope, and then expand your scope. So definitely it forms a huge part of any kind of program, security program, that is based on resilience.
Thanks, Neri. Thanks for the question, Shalva. Anyone else? Last 40 seconds. Dave. Right.
So as Australians, physically very far away, visually very connected, we have this mentality of should be right. What are kind of yours, in terms of convincing the board to take security seriously, what are some of those kind of key things you feel like to the whole audience?
Anyone wants to take that?
I couldn't hear it properly.
The
But
question, yeah.
it's like, how do we support cross-borders data and sovereignty?
So how do you find any kind of key drivers to convince boards to take security seriously? Because we have this should be right mentality in Australia. So how do you overcome that?
Yeah, I mean, even like at the beginning, when I was like, we need to build a much more robust security framework, it was almost like, oh, you security guys, you only want to sell more security or buy more security. It's not, you're like a mechanic, trying to find problems with the car. And it's like, no, but there's some real problems with it. Like I said, there's a lot of this Black Ops team that we have where we just implement like the WAF. We implement other things like an AWS cloud for guard duty and so on. So we have those metrics of how many times people are knocking on our door. And once that data comes in of like, this system hit us, and this system hit us which was nearly successful, had they done it this way, we would actually been open for attacks. That was the first thing. So that started the conversation of how much we should be spending on security. And after that, it became a never-ending approach of trying to get more data through our DevSecOps pipelines from our systems, from AWS, and all the monitoring that we have around the place of what that would cause. And every system comes in there, it does like that mechanic, they'll always find another problem. And then it's up to us to gauge whether that's a risk, that's a risk for our business or for our customer data. And that makes the board far more lenient on handing over those checks to support it.
Yeah, I'll just add to that. I think you have to speak the board's language, which is all about risks and all about dollars. And if you can communicate how security is impacted by that, then they'll get it. And it is making them understand about security, so it's quite important.
All right. Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Sean. Thank you, Nevi, for the great panel session here. I think really interesting stories. Half an hour is not going to do justice to discuss everything that you've been through and you're going to go through in near future. But thank you again for making time and giving your presence here.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thank you very much. Oh, brilliant. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Thank you, Peter. Thank you. Thanks.
Are you going to dance off again?
I think so. Let's the music start, yeah. Thanks, everyone.